In the autumn of 1848, in the rolling hills of Loudoun County, Virginia, a child was born into bondage. His name, George Washington Johnson, a boy born to a 15-year-old father and a 13-year-old mother, born into the chains of slavery, yet destined to leave a voice that would echo through history. George's early years were unusual for a child born a slave. Taken into the home of a prosperous white farming family, he became the playmate of their own son. Here, in this complex space between oppression and proximity to privilege, George learned something forbidden to most slaves. He learned to read and write. In a society where the color of his skin marked him as inferior, where freedom was denied, this boy found his first taste of voice, not just in literacy, but in the joy of music. By the 1870s, after the smoke and devastation of the Civil War, George migrated north. New York City became his stage, its streets his theater. There, he sang for coins, whistled for pennies, performed for ferry riders and bustling crowds. His laughter, his whistle, his uncanny ability to infuse songs with personality, this was George's gift. It was on those streets that George Washington Johnson honed the skill that would mark him as the first African American to record commercially. In the spring of 1890, a recording company, one of the earliest of its kind, invited him into their laboratory. Here, the magic of invention met the resilience of a former slave. Johnson performed two songs he had sung for years, the laughing song and the whistling coon. These songs carried over the mechanical grooves of primitive wax cylinders, captured the vitality of the street. He laughed in rhythm with the music. He slurred, he dropped his G's. He made the songs alive. To listeners of the 1890s, this was revolutionary. To George, it was the art of survival. But in the world in which George sang was cruel and complex, his songs, as playfully as they seemed, existed within a racially segregated society. They contained caricatures, mocking tones, coon songs, popular in a white-controlled entertainment world. The laughter that made audiences smile was layered with the bittersweet reality of a black man performing in a society that refused to see his humanity. And yet, despite the indignities, George thrived where he could. His records sold thousands of copies. By the mid-1890s, it was claimed that 50,000 copies of the laughing song had been made, a staggering number for that era, produced painstakingly by singing the song repeatedly into recording horns, one cylinder at a time. He built his legacy, note by note, laugh by laugh. His artistry was naturalistic, at a time where most music was formal, precise, and rigid. His voice retained the rawness of the street, sharp, penetrating, and alive. It reached listeners through acoustic ear tubes, a clarity modern ears can scarcely imagine. For a fleeting moment, race did not bar him from recognition. But the same society that enabled his brief rise would not sustain it. As recording technology advanced, the need for George's repeated performances faded. By the early 1900s, with disc records supplementing cylinders, only one or two master recordings were needed to produce hundreds of copies. This pioneering street singer who had given voice to a new industry was no longer required. Johnson, now in his 60s, fell into poverty. He began to drink heavily. He died alone on January 23, 1914, forgotten by an industry he had helped to build. A tragic end for the first African American to achieve commercial recording success. His songs had opened doors for countless artists who followed, yet George himself received little of the enduring acclaim he deserved. The world remembered the novelty, the laughter, but forgot the man. The laughing song endures today not as a mere entertainment, but a testimony, a testament to ingenuity, resilience, and the bittersweet reality of a black artist in post-Civil War America. Johnson's laughter still echoes, reminding us of the man who brought the streets to the recording studio, who sang, whistled, and laughed his way into history. even if history forgot him for a time. Tim Brooks, a historian and author, writes, Johnson demonstrated that an African American could succeed on record. He opened the door for many who followed, even as he was later cast aside. A life of brilliance, laughter, and invisibility. George Washington Johnson was buried in Maple Grove Cemetery in Kew Gardens, Queens, New York. It would take a century for recognition to come. A memorial dedicated in 2014 and the Library of Congress adding the Laughing Song to the National Recording Registry, ensuring that the first African American recording star is remembered not just as a novelty, but as a pioneer. His life, though bittersweet and often overlooked, is a testament to perseverance, to artistry, and to the enduring power of a voice that refused to be silenced. You know, it was difficult to find information on George W. Johnson. There was only one book written about him that I could find, along with like a few articles. So logically, I felt like I was working at a disadvantage trying to research him. And unfortunately, more often than not, the history we're taught or the history we're able to read about is almost always told from the perspective of the advantaged at the time, with entire pieces being left out or distorted. And that kind of pissed me off, thinking about it, to be honest. I did go through a few legal archives, some census records, and even slave registers. But overall, like I said, it was hard to find information on him. And I did have some mixed emotions while writing about George because, in my personal opinion, I think this man might have had some skeletons in his closet. And I'll get into that in a minute, but this story is yet another example of how America has robbed Black Americans of so much. Another example of how this country has had absolutely no problem taking, stealing, and using certain aspects of our culture while purposely ignoring the historical context. In other words, they want our rhythm, but not our blues, child. While doing my research, I also found out that George was initially buried in an unmarked grave. And as I mentioned earlier, it would take a full century before he received any recognition or a proper memorial dedicated to him. And the sad part is, I'm sure there were countless other African American artists during this time period who also went completely unnoticed, just wiped out of history. I'm just so sick and tired of coming across stories like this with no happy endings, y'all. Like, I'm so tired of it. And if I were to really sit back and think about everything my people have been through, I'd be depressed for 100 years. I really would. Now, on to why I think Mr. Johnson might have some skeletons in his closet. I found out that although he was not legally married and had no children, he did have 2 common law wives, and both of them died while they were with him. The first one, an unnamed German-American woman, was found dead in their apartment on West 39th Street in late 1894 or early 1895, and no charges were filed. 4 years later, his partner, I hope I'm saying this name right, Roskin Stewart, was found beaten and unconscious in their apartment on West 41st Street on October 12, 1899. She was taken to the hospital and died a few hours later. Johnson was tried for first-degree murder and found not guilty. And I don't really know what to think about that. I really don't. You guys let me know your thoughts down in the comment section. Let me know how you feel about Mr. George W. Johnson. And what are your thoughts on the legacy of African American music or Black American music? Because it is literally the foundation of every type of genre that we see today. What are your thoughts on our legacy and how so much has been taken from us? Anyway, thanks for listening, and I'll talk to y'all later. Bye.